Yeah. Please, God. Please, God. Please, God. We gotta change things. Yeah. We on the wealthiest continent on the planet, God. Funny enough, it's also where the poorest people are. I know I'm destined for wealth, but seeing the people starve is messing with my head to the point that it reaches the heart. And I don't even start working on these business plans.
So just a bit of background. So from my side, I can say this began a long time ago. Like when I finished my studies, I sent myself on a backpacking adventure up East Africa. So I went from South Africa to Mozambique, Malawi, Tanzania, Kenya, Ethiopia. I got as far as Ethiopia. I didn't get to Uganda, but yeah, what an adventure! And just like on every journey, like a bus trip or a taxi ride or something, I'm sitting next to someone and get to talking, tell them what I'm doing, and they're so interested and they like come home. And so they show me around their town and even feed me. You know, I stay at their place, and this happens so often. You know, it's not like for oneself. And sometimes I've been in difficulty without money, and people will solve my problem, take me to the bank that can cash traveler's checks, whatever. And so, yeah, I just got this sense of the beauty of not just Africa, but African people and the culture and the consciousness. And um, yeah, so fast forward a few years, and last year I sent myself back to university and I'm studying psychology. And so during our course, they in the community psychology section, they introduced us to all these interesting projects that people are doing around Africa, like Pilani Mentor Mothers in Cape Town. I'll maybe touch on it a bit. Friendship Bench in Zimbabwe. So it just opened my mind. And so my interest in film and documentary, my interest in travel and adventure, my interest in psychology and healing and community-based programs and Black consciousness. So everything kind of came together, you know. So yeah, and at the same time, I started doing websites for nonprofit organizations. Lorraine was supposed to join us. I don't know if she couldn't come on, she might be a bit late, but through Lorraine, I met Sylvia, and Sylvia, I'm doing Sylvia's website. So let me just go to part of the matter. So Black consciousness, Steve Biko, in the 1970s, he quit his studies. He was studying medicine in Durban, but we all know the political situation in South Africa. So he started heading up these Black community programs, and they were doing all kinds of things. They were publishing Black consciousness, what do you call it, magazine. They were doing socio-economic development projects and arts and culture projects. And it was all about, like he says here in this quote, to break this attitude, to defeat this sense that the Black person is inferior. So he says the inferiority complex is the main thing we have to address. Like what we're aiming for is to create a documentary series that will enable different community programs to we showcase them so they get support and funding, but also other NPOs can learn from them and say, okay, that's a good idea and we can apply that here. Or how did they solve this problem that we're struggling with? And, you know, that kind of, but yeah, part of it is to look at these African, not just icons, but leaders and people who really did actual things to change the world for, like the Wangari Maathai in Kenya. You know, she's planted, I mean, besides planting so many trees and changing the landscape, she's also done so much work in democracy and I don't know, there's a lot. But anyway, so coming to Sylvia's website, we're talking about what makes a community program sustainable. So in terms of the environment, but also financially. So you can't always be dependent on funding to keep you going. So if your project becomes self-sustaining, then you know that's our main criteria. So like also it means like how long is your program been going? Some programs they last a year and then they fizzle out. So if the project's around for 10 years and it's growing, gaining momentum and expanding, then it's a sign that it's sustainable. So effective, I chose this picture of these baskets because they're so beautifully woven. You know, if you look at the pattern, you look at the craftsmanship and, you know, so they're training people to actually do these, to make these baskets and to sell them. And so that tells me that this is an effective program. And then community-based is the last criteria. And so if somebody from the outside comes in and does a lot of work and it's good work, but that person has to leave and they leave and everything falls apart because the community themselves haven't been upskilled and empowered and, you know, so it just falls apart. But if the community are involved and the community are driving the process, then it's going to last and survive. So yeah, with that in mind, I would hand over to each of you, and you can just talk around these subjects and these themes in the way that it applies to you. And at the same time, I'll just go to your. So since we are on Sylvia's project, Sylvia, you can start us off and tell us about your program. I've got pictures up.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you so much, my dear great people that are meeting you today. As I said, I am the executive director and the founder of Golden Women Vision in Uganda. We have the survivors who suffered during the atrocities of the LRA war in northern Uganda. We have the women, we have the children who came back from captivity and their mothers who have nowhere to stay. Some of them came back, and when they came back, they found life was very difficult. You can see the pictures of these children. These are the orphans that Golden Women Vision Uganda is trying to keep them. There are other children who are abandoned and they have nowhere to stay. So as mothers, we feel like these are the children who might in the future bring great ideologies and might be very important in the community. So the activities that we do, that we engage, you can see this is Margaret. She's amputated during the LRA war. She was shot. You can see she's having only one arm, and at her chest, she's having serious bullet of the bomb that affected her. But you can see me here trying to lift her up as an organization. So she can't dig, she can't do anything, but she can carry the bananas on her head and walk on the street, and she sells them to help her meet her household needs and pay her children to school so that she does not become beggars. Maybe another scroll. So you look at this, we engage the children and make music matter so that they forget the past. They have the healing, it's like a healing ailment to the wound. The children tells their stories, they could play, so they could sing. And out of the story, they write, even we write for them the song so that the world should get to know what happened to the mothers and their children as well, so that their voices are heard. We fought in this that you can see me there trying to make sure we cannot, the communities cannot buy the liquid soap production even during the pandemic. But we as an organization engage the women to make the liquid soap themselves. We got the training, as you see the chart there, we train them on how to make the liquid soap production, the shampoos, so that we could distribute to the vulnerable survivors, vulnerable people, even in the market, because as Northern Uganda, we experience death tolls that many people died. So we feel this pandemic should really not kill all of us, kill all these vulnerable survivors. They are in hard to reach places. They can't afford to buy even a piece of soap. You see, I am here with the ladies who had been defined. And when I was called from the police station, they have nowhere to stay. These are the children of the survivors. But as a girl child, you can see, we engage them so that they could make different types of cakes. And in this, it brings to their creativity so that they could even sell them and they could buy with the pads. The ladies had been, they had a school dropout due to even, they could not even afford to get a pad for themselves. So we feel when we engage this kind of ladies so that they keep on studying, they keep on being in public places also, and then they exercise their talent as well. We found that it was very difficult. People were dying, a lot of committing suicidal cases. So we started giving them food. It was a donation that was given with the Stand Speak Rise Up. They gave us once, so we distributed to them. This was the first wave of the pandemic. Now we are entering the second wave of the pandemic. Uganda is in lockdown, and right now we have many of them, even at the office here. They are there looking for food because the border, we call it border, the cyclist is banned. We have to move 10 kilometers. So you cannot go on a border. There's no any vehicle that could take you. So life is becoming difficult at the moment that we just have to pray. So this was the first. So the second, we are in it. We engage the women in to solve. There's a lot of gender-based violence in homes, and you can see even the women and men. Some of men are being beaten, but they have issues, but they cannot come up with it. But the women comes out very fast to act on how, because they look at the children. So we involve them in dialogues. In the dialogues, when we have a lot of gender-based violence cases, we make sure the men also, we involve them so that we involve the perpetrators and even those ones who reported the issues so that we could share it, so that we stop the gender-based violence in different communities.
Involve perpetrators as well.
We involve the perpetrators as well, so that the perpetrator will go back home, and then also even in the small group could share the story how he or she settled the case in a very good way to avoid court issues and other things that comes arise.
Okay, Sylvia, thank you so much. And there's so much to discuss and so many questions, but time is short. And I want to make sure we get to everybody. So we'll come back to discussion and questions. But let me jump to Marshall, because Marshall is also in the community based, and then we'll hear from Milo after that. So Marshall, you want to take us through Greyton Transition Town and Valley Food Gardens? What is a transition town, firstly?
Thanks so much. Yeah, so I think it's quite interesting how there's quite a lot of queries around this at the moment. We started in 2012, so a transition town movement. So this is something that started in Totnes by a guy called Rob Hopkins. And Rob Hopkins, his idea was to look at how can towns or villages or cities sustain themselves if anything might happen, or this was not even thinking about a pandemic as such where we're in at the moment, but it's looking at anything that might happen where communities can't support themselves. And a transition movement is based on how to depend less on government, how to depend much more on people that's living in those communities and tapping into those resources that's existing in the communities. We know that government is not in a place where they can help every single person or communities. So for us, it's all about how do we empower people with their expertise, with their talents, with their skills. If it's having food in their backyards, if it's using their expertise of building, of helping people, rather than always being part of the kind of handout culture system where we depend on government itself. So we started off in 2012 as a small town in the Overberg, with just over 10,000 people. And we looked, and the main pillars of a transition town is your food security, because I mean, that's one of the main ones. It's waste management, it's environmental education, and then obviously lastly, which is more larger, is is your clean energy, which is looking at renewable energy like solar and stuff like that. Obviously, the two main things that we're working on at the moment is food security and waste management, because those are the two things that's part of your life kind of daily. I mean, that's something that forms part of every community, is food and waste. Where's your waste going to? How's it kind of dealt with? Again, not waiting for municipalities or government to come up with a solution, but looking at how communities can innovate around their own ideas and implement that. So, as I said, we started in 2012, and our main projects that we're now busy doing is we have 6 schools in the area. We work with all of them and looking at alternative education for these kids that's not always academically fit. So we're looking at how to alternatively bring them into a more hands-on learning way, have their own food in the garden, how we can set them up as micro businesses. We have 2 local markets that we run every week, where we also inspire people to grow their own food, and then we buy it in for them to also make money at the same time. So which means it's not always sitting and waiting for food aid or government aid, but how can you actively do something for yourself in a sense? And then we also, part of our kind of waste management system is that we run a swap shop, which is basically where we've implemented this 7 years ago, where people bring recyclable waste for food, for stationery, for diapers, for kids, as a way of putting value on waste, as a way of making sure that people see waste or plastic in a completely different way. So like once a month, we we have a swap shop where we have 2 at the moment, where people actively bring their waste in exchange for food. We just got a massive a sponsorship for a uncapped hotspot in a community, where people now will start getting vouchers for free Wi-Fi for their waste as well, because data is always an issue, airtime is an issue. So we just gotten that as a massive sponsorship from one of our Wi-Fi companies. And just lastly, well, it's just with the Valley Food Gardens. This is something that started in lockdown. So with lockdown last just over a year ago, when we're in level 5, we've partnered with Red Cross and a few churches and 1 or 2 schools, and we formed a kind of pandemic committee. We've then privately raised over 1.2 million rand, again not depending on government, because we know that they had quite a bit on their plate when lockdown hit in terms of supporting people. So we've raised that money through corporates and private funding and supported people with food parcels, because that was the main thing at the time that people needed. We've done that for about 4 to 5 months, and about 6 months later, the Valley Food Gardens was born, because my idea was food parcels is obviously not a sustainable method. It's not a sustainable way to feed people and to hand out food all the time. It makes people dependent on organizations and government. Then we launched the Valley Food Gardens, where the concept was give a man that fishing rod to fish for himself rather than the actual fish. And for us, it was how do we support people with seeds and seedlings and compost and information to start their own vegetable garden, in a sense that they can now support themselves, that they can eat from the garden. And we've also opened it up now that we again commit as Valley Food Gardens to buy in any surplus that they can make money from that as well. So I think that's in yeah. So I think so I think that's in a nutshell. I think, I mean, we can obviously as Walid said, we can talk about this for a full day constantly, but I think that's in a nutshell what we're busy doing in this area. Yeah, thank you so much.
No, thank you. Really amazing work you guys are doing, Sylvia and Marshall. And we'll come back at the end. Hopefully, we'll have time. But anyways, let's go to Milo. And I didn't know you worked on LNN, Late Night News. And, you know, that's, I love that show. It's brilliant. It's so funny, but it's also so hard-hitting. It gets right to the... yeah, so tell us a bit more about it.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself. Yeah, no, it's been off for a couple of years now, Late Night News. But it was basically, excuse me one second. It was basically, I think the thing is, as we know, South Africa, the political dynamics, it's so absurd, you know, that it was an opportunity to shine a light on it, you know, to punch up, to speak truth to power. And I think, you know, the Deprente team, Kagiso, Lidicha, who's, I suppose, he's my friend and mentor, and the boss at Deprente, we had been, I guess, enjoying this realm of, they had been since, I mean, Pure Manati show in those days, they had been pushing the boundary in terms of making South Africans laugh and telling South African stories, you know, giving unofficial accounts.
Despite all his woes, Limpopo's finest was back with a vengeance, swinging from the hip and taking no prisoners.
Well, I mean, that being sort of wrapped up, and it was difficult to, I mean, we got a lot of international success for it. I think the thing is that it made it accessible for parents and kids to understand the political dynamics that were happening in South Africa. Yeah, and it was a fun show to make. Obviously, we got into a bit of trouble at times because with satire, you're constantly skirting the lines. You know, there was also a Protection of Information Acts coming in. There was a couple of these kind of things happening. And eventually it led to its downfall. And there hasn't really been a satirical show for the last couple of years on that level that's, you know, has that impact, that's on ETV, a free-to-air channel, that has, you know, people accessing it in that way. I mean, we had people like Gwede Montashe were watching the show, Zwelen Zimavavi was on the show, and we had like a lot of production value because we were able to get all these big names, you know, and we had them laughing.
But I think, okay, white people are hot, I guess, but then black people are also hot.
Your refusal to eat this food with your hands shows a disregard for our culture, and it's a perfect reflection of your apartheid mentality. They ate that spaghetti with their hands and never complained again, never.
In my seminar, I don't only teach people to use apartheid on white people. We're living in an evolving society. You'll discover new ways of blaming apartheid. Listen to Jabu's experience.
I used to be a terrible lover. My wife even threatened to leave me for another man because she was saying I was not making her happy in bed. I said to her, you are adopting Eurocentric ideas of love adopted from imperialist publications such as the Cosmo and Marie Claire, brought to our shores by the white man, and a direct result from that apartheid. Now we are still together.
There you have it, South Africa. Find new ways
So
to
it's
blame
also,
apartheid and get
when you
ahead
have
in life by coming
powerful
to my
people
2-day
laughing,
seminar.
it's an interesting way to communicate uncomfortable truths with them, right? And so, I mean, you know, we always saw it as we were doing our bit. Obviously, as a writer, it's hard to even, you know, even talking after you, Sylvia and Marshall, it's such it's an honor to meet you guys and hear about the amazing work you're doing. We think of it in terms of what we do. It's like, it's trying to speak our voices, you know, and I think getting to Queen Sono, one of the important things was that, you know, as you were talking about your journey as well, it's like young Black people, they don't see themselves on screen. They don't hear their stories on screen. It's you know, we take on all these international narratives sort of that are developed. We don't have the opportunity to see our heroes, to see strong Black women on screen that can be spies, that can be strong, that can kick butt. So that was the idea behind Queen Sono. And obviously, with our sort of our past in terms of political satire and those kind of things. There's obviously allegory to sort of the death of Chris Hani. There's narratives of sort of supremacist, white supremacist involvement in the country. There's allusions to colonialism. There's all those kinds of things. But it was the first Netflix commissioned African show, and we're very proud of it. Obviously, on a shoestring budget. It's not a James Bond budget, but we were very proud of it. And I think the one challenge would be is when I look at the project. I mean, perhaps Walid, you can tell us what your thoughts are. Is I hear docu-reality, and you've got obviously strong documentary things. You want to tell these stories of these communities, share that with the world. You want to inspire people and teach people, but you also want to entertain people. What is the middle space? Where can you have sort of fictional narratives in there? How do you tell sort of historical stories? What are the sort of the vehicles and formats that audiences will access this through? How are audiences going to experience this project? You know, how are they going to engage with these stories of powerful stories of communities mobilizing? So, I mean, I don't necessarily have the answer. We can spitball. I mean, I'm here to help and to serve. So, yeah, I'll pass it back.
Yeah, thank you. We've only got a few minutes left. I just got a notification. So we'll have to pick it up in the next session, but I'm planning to have them weekly, and there'll be other guests. So next week, hopefully, Pilani, Mentor Mothers, Ulungula Incubator, and Friendship Bench in Zimbabwe are going to join us. And so these are, some of them are projects, places I've actually been to myself, and some of them are places I heard about and stuff. But, you know, whoever's available on the day, people from my team, people from the organizations, artists, writers, musicians, whoever it is, you know, it's a more relaxed and chilled space for now for us to explore this. But also we're developing, you can call it a pitch for the documentary series. So that's something we're working towards. We're developing the website because that will be like a key nexus, a meeting place where the different organizations can keep connected. And so now with COVID restrictions, it's very difficult to film anything physically. I mean, it can be done, but it's, so what we plan to do is to communicate on Zoom and to film things and, you know, to let that be our starting place. And then people in their different projects can send us video material and pictures, and we, so we don't have to wait for funding. We can start developing our series already, you know, and put it out there. So then when we do get to Netflix, we've got something to show, and it's like a foregone conclusion. But Bulungula are keen for us to come down there, and they are on the South Coast. And so we're putting together a small production crew to go down there, do some quality filming. And the beauty of this village is that it's purely African rural village. It's not built up. There's no supermarkets and shops and KFCs and McDonald's in it. I'm not saying those are necessarily bad things, but if you want to see pure African traditional life, you know, that's where I got the feel for it, the taste for it, and so that's what I want to depict there. But what they're doing as a community is brilliant. Okay, we're going to go over time. I mean, it's going to cut any minute now. So yeah, I'll keep you guys informed, and I'll send you minutes of the meeting kind of and updates, and then we can see how we go from there. But yeah, the main idea is to support these programs and to get, there's really wealthy organizations and individuals around the world, and they want to support good programs, but it's so hard to know, can I trust this person, you know? So if we have a good platform that's, you know, with a lot of quality video material that people can see that these projects are sustainable, effective, and community-based and responsible, people will contribute.